Welcome everyone to today's webinar, An Introduction to Using Artificial Intelligence in Cultural Heritage Work. Our presenter today is Rebecca Bacher, coming to us from Florida International University. And just a few housekeeping notes for today. Today's session is being recorded. You are not able to unmute yourself, but if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. And we have also enabled closed captioning. The captions are automated, so just keep in mind that there may be errors because it is automated. Otherwise, I will go ahead and pass it on to Rebecca for today's presentation.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Kayla. Thanks, everyone, for coming. It's really good to see everyone. As mentioned, I'm Rebecca. I'm the Digital Collections Librarian at FIU in the Digital Collections Center. And as my kind of intro, I think I put too much in the slides. So I'm going to try to figure out maybe where to focus on more and then give you the slides later, or maybe determine what we want to talk about later, because there's a lot of AI stuff happening rapidly. And I kind of went down quite the little rabbit's nest, rabbit burrow, whatever it is. But first, I was hoping we could start with a little quick poll. Can we go to menti.com if you can and enter that code into join? That will allow me to see maybe where we are, how are we feeling. Let's see if I can go to here and see some results. Is everyone able to access it? These are good words. All right, good, it works too. So we have kind of like the concrete, like things to be thinking about. It's scary. I'm with you. Someone's like, the more you know, the scarier you realize that it is. Water, when we're thinking about like the server farms, absolutely something I think about. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. Part of the reason I like to do this, I did another one. You're never like, is this people really enthusiastic about AI and like loving everything about it? In which case I'm gonna like be kind of a downer, or are you already downers and I'm here to give you the excitement? So I like the idea of creativity. I do personally think there's a lot of opportunity for creativity in using AI. Let me go to the next question. Is that this one? Does that work for you guys? Are you able to see? No, actually, I don't know how to do it. Is it allowing you to go to the next question now?
I think we might need the QR code again.
It didn't like automatically bring you to, I don't know how to use it. I should have tested this. All right, let's just start with that. We had a word cloud. That gave me kind of at least a lay of the land. What are we thinking? How do we feel about things? Let me go back to presentation. Here's what I hope to cover. I'm happy to kind of spend more time in the actual kind of practical session where I give like a little demo than some of these others, but I want to be talking about what AI is, kind of get some frameworks on how we can evaluate it. I'll spend most of my time kind of talking about workflow automation because it's a thing I'm particularly passionate about, and I find it to be a less ethically sticky as we're talking about. And we'll talk about some just concrete tools for transcription, OCR, and like doing documentation. And then finally, we'll talk about AI generated metadata, which could be actually any one of these could be their own webinar. So let's first talk about what AI is. What am I talking about? There's two kind of basic ones. And I think some of the anxiety that comes about AI is when we kind of think of it as like one thing. AI is a broad umbrella term, as we know. It's for computational techniques that perform tasks we associate with human intelligence. And that includes things like pattern recognition, language processing, decision making. But these tools that are grouped under that umbrella are actually pretty different from each other. For this presentation, we're going to be kind of focusing on two categories: generative AI, and that's what we would think of as our large language models like ChatGPT or Copilot. These are AI tools that generate new content. They write things, they describe them, they summarize them. And then the other AI category is predictive, which is one that identifies patterns, classifies information, and makes predictions. So text recognition, OCR, is predictive. Speech to text is predictive. And I think the reason that this matters is that these tools work differently. They have different failure modes and they require different levels of human oversight. So like a generative tool like ChatGPT can give you a great subject heading for something if you put it in, but it might be wrong. Whereas an OCR, its output, if it's wrong, is maybe like a wrong character, right? And so the weight of those is a little bit different. So just kind of to think about and they each kind of have some different ethical dilemmas. I would say there's more hairiness with generative AI. Um, but they're different and it's a spectrum. That's the main point I'm trying to get across. Um, Kind of dominant culture and has blind spots then. If you're dealing with a collection that is an underrepresented community, you're putting it into a system that is not made for that. And so that's something to be thinking about. The good news is there are some domain specific tools, ones that are trained specifically for archives and archival text. The one I think of the most is Transcribus, right? It's meant for us. Most of the tools we're going to be talking about were not meant for us. We're learning how to adapt and use them, but they certainly aren't made thinking like, what's a librarian going to do with this? And let's make sure that it like solves their problems. Um, so that's why we need to be especially aware and cognizant of how these tools came to be, where they're getting their training data, and whether or not they might be appropriate for the work that we're doing. And as we know, there's some concerns with AI. We all have some. Here's just a handful that I thought of, but then I started thinking about more and they just kept coming. And I won't say this to be flippant. I just don't want you to think that I don't know or that you don't know that there's a lot of concerns about AI. Everything from like mentioned in that word cloud, copyright to bias to losing your job to over reliance to what it's doing to our psyches, what's it doing to our world, what's it doing to our environment. This stuff is real. And I don't want to minimize it. And I know it's only one slide that I'm talking about here, but any one of these could be its own workshop and worthy of research and deep talks and conversations. It's just not the particular scope of this webinar, but I didn't want it to go unspoken that there's some real issues. Um, and your concerns about this are valid. And the one thing I could maybe say is whatever your particular concern is, use that as you're evaluating these AI tools. Like make note of it. Don't kind of put aside your concerns, but use that to inform how it is you approach and use and what tools you think are appropriate for your work. Carry that on. Thank you, Ria, for sending this to me. This is from LinkedIn. This is oops, uh, someone over at OCLC who kind of presented this as a way to look at AI. I know we can sometimes think in absolutes, like if you use AI, you're going to lose your professional values or ethics. Or if you don't use AI, then you're like not staying with things, or you're not protecting the integrity of your work by being, the best that you can be. I do believe it's a false binary to an extent. I mean, there are valid points on both sides, but I've been thinking about it's not really like using AI or not already here. Really, what we need to be thinking about is under what conditions, for which purposes, and with what safeguards should AI be used. I found that to be really helpful. I'm attempting to walk down that line. I encourage you to help me walk there too, while keeping in mind the issues on both sides. And I also want to mention, there's a lot of difference, I think, in discovering AI on your own terms, like I do. I like playing with this stuff. I do this as kind of like my fun things. If this wasn't part of my job, I'd probably still be doing it. I find it exciting. But if my supervisor told me I had to use an AI tool and I didn't have a lot of input on that, I think I'd feel a lot different about it. So I just want to make sure that is, that we're aware of that too. That's a rational response. None of us want to lose agency in our professions. We all, deserve to have our voices heard. So this framing really kind of only works if you have a voice in what that intentional path looks like. Again, this is kind of then, some of these are just kind of like framing, get us oriented in this. The one skill I think that is really essential that we take away from this is knowing how to evaluate AI tools. The AI landscape is changing super fast, exponentially. Every single week, there's a new development, there's a new model, or they've improved another. Um, I mean, the specific tools that we talk about in this workshop could be totally different in 3 months, 1 month. But what's not going to change is developing the skills that allow us to evaluate these AI tools. Um, and that's kind of the difference between like a passive AI user who can't really like speak on it or might reject it because they haven't really played with it versus somebody who's engaged with it enough to have tested it, to understand kind of some big picture how it works. We don't need to know everything, but we know enough about our profession to know when these AI tools are effective or not. So the goal of this is not to turn anybody into an AI engineer. I'm not. I can't code. I can't, you know, do a lot of things that I wish I could, that I'm thankful that AI can help me do. But it's just how we can be best prepared to help shape policy and make decisions about the AI tools that we use or vendors that we might purchase technology from. And then I'm going to go through these kind of fast because this is just kind of like another big picture framing. Different organizations have kind of had some mindsets that they encourage. We're probably already doing these in our professions. This kind of goes part and parcel with them. This is one from ALA. Previously, when I've kind of thought about using AI tools, I use kind of the digital humanities ones, which is kind of the same thing of like being curious, being skeptical, being collaborative as we go about this. None of us should be doing it alone because there's just too much. Workshops like this are really helpful. They go like, what are you doing? How are we doing this? Um, so that's kind of like the big like mindset. And then there's the kind of practical way that I would encourage people to evaluate individual AI tools that they're using. And that could be everything from a large language model to, a little, website that they use that they can do things for. And there's different frameworks for that, depending on your profession, depending on what's important to you. I liked this one because it's particularly for museums. It's done by Pratt and it has like some nice worksheets. This is just a sample of the worksheet on things you could like fill out as you're looking at different AI tools. Another one here, the robot test is just another way of kind of thinking about what you might want to be evaluating. What's the objective of the AI tool? Who developed it? That's a big question. None of the big tech companies, I think, are altruistic and here to save the world. They're all making profits, but kind of knowing how far they're going about that and whether or not it aligns with your values or how far it might differ from your values is just something you may want to like be thinking about kind of big picture when you're looking at these tools. You may want to look at tools and determine how much do they cost? How long does it take to learn? It's kind of another way to be thinking about evaluating. Then there's kind of like the granular, like using a tool. How do you use a rubric or create something to analyze the output of it? This is one we used last summer for a project. I had a student create this. It's a really great way to have students or other people within your area have some buy-in, and how AI tools is to get really kind of critical and look at it at a granular level. What was the output of this? What would I have done? How long did it take? What's worth it? So developing all of these should just be part of the process. And that's what I'm really just trying to get across. The one I personally use, just because it sticks in my head the best, it's one of the first that I saw, was the potato test. And this was done by RISD. The part that I really like, and it's a thing that I'm thinking about often, is this transhumanism part, which is like, why am I using this software? And what is it taking away if I use it? What are the trade-offs of it? Am I relying on it too much? These are things that I think are really kind of important as well to be thinking about. And again, none of these frameworks are like, you should use this one. What I want you to do is find a framework that works for you or develop your own and know that there's tools out there to help you do that depending on your job and how it is that you're interacting with AI. For me, potato is just easy to remember. Um, and it's just something that I don't necessarily always write it down, but I like think about it as I'm using a new tool. And there's links to all of these, and Kayla will send out the slides for these as well. So how are we going to get started? Workflow automation. This is kind of my jam. I have always loved making workflows more efficient. I've been known to spend more time making a workflow efficient than it would have taken me to do it individually because I find it more fun. But it's just something that I like doing. And I think it's also, as I mentioned before, not quite as hairy at this point about using AI. Text recognition or something that's going to help us move folders around, I think has less kind of emotional weight or concern about bias because it's just kind of a general output, right? That's that predictive AI as opposed to that generative AI. So a book that I had read a long time ago that made me actually want to learn Python, although I wasn't very good at it, was this book called Automate the Boring Stuff. And basically it gives you like suggestions on how to create little scripts to do automation. And there's some frameworks for that, of whether or not it's repetitive and rule-based, if any step along the way requires some contextual judgment or humans, if there's kind of consistent formats that you're feeding in and want out, and is the cost of error high, right? Like if you're doing it on, your only copy of something, sort of things that you have to think about when you're determining whether or not automation is worth it. There's the idea. If you do it more than twice and hate it every time, it's worth automating. I would also say, like, just sometimes for consistency, it's just really, or it's just fun. It's also a really good way if you're wanting to learn how to write simple scripts and play with this. Automating to me is a really great place to start. And I'm going to give you some examples, or we're going to do some together. And we're going to do them. Oh, let me give some examples first of what can be automated, as I mentioned before. So doing bulk harvest from the web, scraping websites so that you can pull all the PDFs for something, even if it's your own repository. Our previous repository didn't allow us to do easy reports of our metadata. And so I learned to scrape our own site so that I could like see all the fields and then standardize them. We could batch ingest, we just couldn't batch export. On our new system, we can't, thankfully. Batch renaming. Our new repository, you can see the file names in a way we couldn't before. So we're just seeing how crazy some of our file names are, and they're like this long. So being able to rename those quickly has been helpful, and having workflows for that. Metadata extraction, giving something a file, a textual file, and asking it to give me the title and some basic metadata from that. Great for automation. Batch ingesting, our data repository, we had to create an API to put files in batch as opposed to doing them one by one. Wonderful use of time. Things like converting, your archival TIFF into an accessible JPEG obviously can be done as an automated batch. And a lot of us have been using these tools altogether. Photoshop's got them, and all sorts of Adobe products allow that as well. Transcribing and doing documentation and SOPs is also a nice thing that you can automate. And I'll show some tools for all of these. And by tools, I'm going to show you one tool at the very beginning. Anyway, this is Google Colab, and it's free. It is a really low barrier entry point for trying automation tools or learning how to do some simple scripting. It's browser based, so you're going to do it on Google Colab instead of having to download Python onto your computer and the different Python vocab libraries. You're going to just need a Gmail account. You open a notebook and tell it what it is you want. You can have files in your Google Drive that you pull from, and it can put things back in your Google Drive. So it actually does allow for some scalability, not huge. Like I wouldn't want thousands of documents on there. I think that might max it out. But it's a good way to get started and go, okay, what am I doing enough that I might want to then transfer this onto my own computer that I can do outside of the Colab environment. And the free tier is just great for experimentation. And if you're at an educational institution, I think you get one free year. I haven't needed the free year till this week when I was actually playing with it a lot. So for most casual users, you could just stay on the free tier. And then if you have an EDU, then you could have it for free for a year. And even after that, I don't think it's terribly expensive. But anyways, think of this as like our sandbox, and we're going to go ahead and just get into it. So when you start, um, it's bringing up notebooks that I've done before. And I'm going to just go ahead and create a new notebook. And if you want to follow along with me, have at it. This is just collab.research.google.com. I'm going to create a new notebook. And this here is really just like a chatbot. So this is probably Gemini. I actually don't know for sure, but I can just tell it what I want to do as a script and then it will run it. So let me give it some examples of that I had already put in. So I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but we've had like students create Omeka sites and then nobody knows how to log into the Omeka site and they want me to get all the data out of it. And it's like, well, I can't do it because I'm not in it. So I've used like a web crawler or a scraper to get the metadata out. And that's what I'm going to ask it to do. And I just picked a random Omeka site that only had 10 records, just so for the ease of this. So I've asked it to write a Python script that harvests metadata from individual records on an Omeka site. I gave it the site. I want it to save the results to a CSV file. I want it to extract certain metadata fields, the common ones from an Omeka site, and label each column after the field. And then I want it to give it to me as a CSV that automatically downloads. And I always try to end like, do you need anything from me? Like, did I not give you good instructions? And we're just going to hit here to run. Let's kind of think about it. Let me look at my chat messages while I'm doing this, see if there's anything that's come up. Okay, so it's like, great, it knows how to do it. It's going to inspect the site. It's going to find the URLs and it's like, do you agree? And if so, I can say accept and auto run. I can also run step by step, which is just helpful to learn to see what it does, but just for the quickness of this presentation, I'm going to hit accept and auto run. And it's going to tell me what it's doing. And it's going to show me on this left-hand side what it is doing. And what Python libraries it installed to do it and kind of how it's going about it. So it's using Beautiful Soup, which is just a name of a library that does web scraping. I don't know what request necessarily is. It's telling me what it's doing. When you see text in green, that's generally meant for humans, which is helpful if you're looking at a script and you don't know where to start. And it's telling me what it's doing. And it's writing the script right here. It's writing a script that it is then going to run, and it's going to then pull all these fields for me. Here it says it's inspecting the Omeka site structure. I think I'm doing it on a regular omega.net or org. I don't know what I'm doing. All right. So now it's telling me it's going to define some functions. I don't know what this stuff means. I'm not a coder, but I know it's going to work, which is great. Again, the green part is so that you can just try to learn as a human what it's saying. Now it's going to collect the URLs of each record. And it's going to go from there. I don't know what these things mean necessarily. That didn't work. Well, we'll see. As it's doing this, it's going to take a second. I'm going to open another one to put in another example. I tried to put in like short ones, so we're not like just spending a lot of time looking at it, but I'm going to try to make a new notebook and put in another one. So for this, I want it to transcribe an audio file. I'm going to give it. And it's going to use Whisper, which is a tool that we'll talk about later as well. But I'm just giving it a short little video. It's going to like think about that there. We'll go back to that. Oh, look, it collected the URLs of all the different items in the Omeka site, which is great. It found them. Have you guys ever had an instance where you could see where you'd want to like scrape things from a website? Or is it just me? I feel that. So it found the records. It knows how to label them. Some of it is it knowing like behind the scenes what that label is called, but it's figuring it out, which is great. it already got it all. It's going to now save it in a nice, beautiful CSV file for me. So my files are in this little folder here. Did it do it already? All right, it already downloaded it for me. So let's look and see.
Download complete.
All right, this is what it downloaded for me, which is great. If I had to create this from scratch, or if I had to, for whatever reason, manually find all these fields, this would be a lot more challenging. Again, this was only an Omeka site with like 10. I downloaded so much stuff I had to make my computer tell me. I've opened this in Excel and it was a CSV file, so it's done some funky things here. If I had opened it as an actual CSV, like in LibreOffice, they wouldn't have done this. But it's great. It gave me like all the information in here that I could standardize right now. I could put it into a new repository if I'm sunsetting an Omeka site and wanted to put this data somewhere else, or any repository, anything like that. And again, this was not hard. I didn't have to code. I didn't have to download anything. I was just able to get this and it gave it to me in this all the same environment. Let's see how oh, and the thing to remember to do is up here, like label what it is. I think it's a bunch of untitled. So like here, I'd probably do a Omeka scraper, just so that I can remember and go back to it if I ever needed to. On this one, oh, I never hit play. Oh, there we go. Let's try one more. If you guys don't mind. Is this helpful to you guys? Like, is this giving ideas of things that you could be automating on your own or kind of learning how to jump in, hopefully? Great. All right, I'm gonna make a new notebook. Just trying to think of like examples that I come up with all the time. So here's one, because our new repository, we can, like, as I mentioned before, we can see our PDF names and they are embarrassingly terrible. We just had like a whole project where in the migration, we found out that a lot of the dissertations were Word docs instead of PDFs. And for the accessibility that we're preparing for, we need them to be accessible PDFs. So for this though, when I looked at the names of them, they had crazy names. So I'm going to, like, the names of the file are like dissertation with new margins, or, this is not helping anybody, final, all that sort of stuff that we put in our names is now visible in a way that we don't like. So I'm giving it 3. I could give it a lot more. I'm open in too many, so let me cancel all the others. Yeah, I was testing this out. So. All right. Let's put this in. Let's see if it lets me do it. I'm going to attach these 3. And I've asked it to write a script that reads these PDFs, extracts the title and author from each document, renames the PDFs using a format that I've given it, last name, year, and then the title. But I want the title to be like shortened. I want it to be slugged is what it's called, where it's like no spaces. It's going to have underscores instead of spaces because some repositories or some things don't like having those spaces, understandably, or no other kind of weird character that could disrupt and ingest into another thing. These PDFs happen to be all pretty standard because they're dissertations. So on the title page, it has this information, but you could write a script that asks it to kind of read through the first 5 pages and extract out what it thinks is the title or what it thinks is the author, even if it isn't kind of a standardized document like this. And it's doing kind of the same thing. It's telling me what it had to install, which is this, it's like a PDF library on Python. And again, this is something if you were to like need this daily or weekly, you would then perhaps go to your IT department and say, I want to install Python onto my computer. I'm going to need these libraries. And then this same script you could run locally on your own computer and point it to folders on your own computer. And it's helpful to know because not everything should be going into the cloud. Everything that I've just put up to it is stuff that was already on the internet. But if you're dealing with restricted collections or things that haven't gone up yet, you're going to probably want to run it locally, and you can. This is just giving you an idea of how you would go about it, and know what you would need to install in order for that to happen. And again, it's helpful to like see it, even though I don't understand the words, but I'm seeing what the logic is of the Python script and what it's telling me it wants to do, and how it's thinking about it. Do I understand everything? No, I do not. I've only taken Intro to Python 3 times. But it's one of these things like any language where if you're not really in it all the time, at least for me, it's really difficult to retain. So again, I can look at it enough to go, yeah, I understand, as opposed to like me having to type it. But how cool is it that just through a prompt, I can make a script run and do what it is I want? And it's going to totally like rename these PDFs. It's going to put them in this sample data folder, but I could have in my instructions say, save it to this Google Drive and given the path of my Google Drive. Everything kind of has to happen in Google World for this, but and it can't, you know, if your Google Drive can handle a lot, I guess it could parse through, but you might run out of kind of like your free credits. Uh, let's see what it renames. Let's see whether or not this one. Oh, I didn't tell it to run. So we're gonna put this one as like transcribe. And then this one, I'm famous for not actually renaming them. I'm gonna call this like PDF renamer. Let's see how long it took. There's only 3. This would take a lot longer if there were a lot. Failed to process 3 files. Why? I don't know. Could not extract all required information. Skipping remaining. Well, I don't know why it didn't work. I ran it just an hour ago and it did. So maybe it's because I did rerun it again, or maybe I've saved these folders somewhere. But what it gave me before, because certainly in a live demo, it's not going to work. Let me see if I can look at my previous folders. I don't actually know how to navigate through this very well. Recent. I think it was this one. Okay, like here, it renamed them nice and beautiful. The person's last name, the date, and a little bit of the title. Super easy. Don't know why it didn't work my second time, other than Google Colab's kind of like, why are you in me so much? You've never done this so much. But anyway, are there any other sort of like prompts you'd want me to put in or walk through? Or is this kind of giving you enough of a little like, oh, okay, these are the things I could do by playing with this tool. And this is where I really want you just to be able to walk away with like, okay, I can test something out. I can write something in and talk to the chatbot to get a script to be run and run it locally here. If there's none other, I will move on. But I hope this is helpful. I'm going back to the presentation. Let's go try it. So what I just did was called vibe coding, right? I can't code. I told it what it is I want. If you wanted to do it on your own, as I mentioned, say you don't want it to live in the Google environment for whatever reason, the volume of it, the scale of it, or you just want it to be kind of locally controlled, you can do the same thing on your own device. So you can go to whatever your favorite large language model is of the moment, or at least the least problematic one of the moment. Some of them have actual interfaces just for coding, which is great. And you would give it a good prompt, tell it what it is you want, ask it, what do I need installed on my computer to do this? Maybe speak with your IT department to make sure you have Python and whatever libraries it needs installed. So this is one that I ran. Let me see what the purpose of this one. Oh, this is kind of, I think, the same thing, to be like renaming something, I think. This is using Visual Studio Code. So this is just a code editor that I've used right here on here. And this is like the link to download it. It's free as well. It's owned by Microsoft. The great thing about it is when you run a code here, like you type in your code in here that you get from your chatbot, your large language model, you literally just get to copy it, paste it into here, and then you could just hit this little triangle and it runs it. It looks a little bit different on a PC, but the basic concepts are still there, that you can just run it from here and then it gives you the output that you want. And then you're going to like save your script someplace. And if you have any questions about this along the line, you can just say to your large language model, how do I do this? Where do I find this? And it's a very patient teacher, which is great, especially when you have dumb questions like I often do. just like prompting generally for, ChatGPT, a good prompt is important. So for vibe coding, I'd start out with just a few sentences, kind of like big picture. What is it I need to do? What do I have? What do I want you to give me? And what are some of the rules about it? And then often, sometimes I have to give some constraints. I have to say, like, I'm on a Mac because it will ask me to do something that can only be done on a PC or something like that. A suggestion I would have in any script that you run locally is you ask it to give you a log, build that into the prompt. Give me a log so that you can see when something goes wrong, because inevitably something's going to go wrong. And if it just runs and nothing happens, you don't know why. But if it gives you a log, you can then take that information and then post it back into the chatbot and say, why did this happen? A vague prompt gets a vague script. That is true. Maybe. I think a vague prompt gives you just a script that doesn't work at all, honestly. Some more tips is that whatever you work on, don't do it on your originals, right? Make another folder if you're having it rename a bunch of files, or just don't do it on your master copies of anything. As I mentioned before, if it's not going to be publicly available, don't put it up into, honestly, don't put that file into a large language model, and don't put it up into Colab, because you've just put it out into the world. And none of these companies have been very clear about what they do with our data that we give them. For a lot of codes, so like for when I'm batch ingesting records into our Dataverse platform, I have to have an API token to show I have permission to do that. And that token is generated by Dataverse, and it's given to me, and it's like a key. And a lot of times in your code, you have to show that you have the permissions for that. But if you were then to take that code and put it into a large language model, you've just given who knows who the key to do what you're doing, a backdoor key. So it's something to really think about. If you ever do accidentally find that you put an API key into a large language model, you need to immediately reset your code, which is something that you could do. But just generally know that if you're copying and pasting the code and putting it back into ChatGPT and it has your API token or any sort of personal information in there, that's not a good practice. You can always just ask it to make sure that you enter that in separately, not as part of the script. As mentioned, I think I did before, if you need something like, I have a bunch of Word docs, I want to convert them to PDFs, then I want to rename them, and then I want to move them. Theoretically, you could do that as one long script, but to me, maybe it's just the fact that I'm not that great at this. It's easier for me to break it into those three, because then if something goes wrong, you kind of know which step, as opposed to like just at the end not having things. So breaking it into smaller scripts for me has been more workable. I'm doing a dry mode, like asking it to like run through and show you what it would be doing before it does it is helpful. And you can write into the script, make it so it runs in dry mode first. Test on a small sample, as we can imagine, right? Don't give it all 1,000 files at first. Give it a couple, make sure the output is correct. Version your script. So like in my visual code, I would maybe indicate, what version of Python or the date that I did it. I'm not that great at it. I'll look at a bunch of scripts and be like, which one's the most recent? So it's best to make sure you know. And if it doesn't work the first time, again, having that log, putting it back into, your ChatGPT or whatever and saying, why didn't this work? So it can inform you and go, oh, this code had this error on this line. Sometimes it will tell you to just fix that line, which is why having that visual code editor is helpful to go into. When it gets into be a lot, I'm sometimes like, just give me the whole code again. Like, I do not trust myself to put in like a space where I need to put it. Not yet anyway. And if it's a script that you run a lot, you can ask it to give you a graphical user interface, a GUI. And that I'll get into that in a little bit as well. If I was to suggest one real skill to learn, it would not be learning Python. It would be knowing how to use command line. It's terminal on a Mac and command prompt on a PC. These, you don't have to be fluent necessarily, but you need to know how to navigate this little black box, right? When you pull up command prompt or terminal, knowing where you are on your computer this way, knowing how to change the directory to get where you want to be, because that's how you're going to run a script locally on your computer. So I've saved this script in this folder, so I had to move command prompt to that folder so that I could then type in the command to run it. And for me on my Mac, because I'm on Python 3, I typed in Python 3 and then the name of my script. And my script ends in PY, that stands for Python. So knowing this is really helpful because you can also run simple scripts in command line. And it just also gives you a better understanding of how your computer is storing and organizing its information. And there's some great resources to do training on learning about command line. I did mine at Library Carpentry. It's free, it's self-paced. It kind of just gives you like step by step, like let's start by opening up your terminal and typing in change direct CD and moving to another folder. Just to give you an understanding of how this works. But it's very difficult to run any local script if you don't know how to navigate in this world. So that's my other kind of takeaway. If you think you're going to be writing scripts and want to run them, you need to know how to navigate command line. Not expertly, but enough to know like how to get to it and how to move to the folder in order to run the script. How to install things. That's where you're going to install Python. And the libraries is within here as well. So just knowing and being comfortable in this world is really helpful. Okay, so as I mentioned before, if you're going to do a script over and over, it is annoying to have to go to command line and type all that in. It's also very annoying if you have a script like we have here to, this is our batch ingest into my data repository. So I'm telling it where I want it to go. My API key that I need to make sure I don't actually put in that script or put it anywhere else that people can get that or I have to reset. I need to tell it where my spreadsheet is within this script. And if there's any spaces in any folder of subdirectories, when I get there, it can act a little cranky. Same thing with like my file directory. So I asked the ChatGPT probably to create a GUI, a GUI, graphical user interface, that gives me the same thing of this script, but in just something we can click and open. And that way, instead of having to type in the path of like my spreadsheet, I can just hit here, browse, and then I'm going to just find that folder. It now knows exactly where it is. Even if my file folders have spaces or weird characters in it, it doesn't matter. It's found that spreadsheet. It's found that folder. It also gives me my little log right here. It allows me to do a dry run. These are all things I just asked. So I'm like, give me a GUI that does these things. I mean, that was through some trial and error. But it's helpful because then not everybody's going to be proficient in command line, at least not right away. Or it's just annoying to have to go in there and type in all this code. The options for errors go up exponentially, especially if you're in a hurry and it's something that you do all the time. So creating a little GUI is also makes you feel like a coder, makes you feel like you made a thing, which is great. All right, so now I'm going to get into some tools. And this might be one that you've heard about before. It's called Whisper. It's open source. It's owned by OpenAI. It's free and you can run it entirely on your computer. So you can do speech to text for free on your own computer. This is great if you have oral histories or content that's not going to go up online, which is great for restricted materials just generally, where you're concerned about privacy. It handles 99 languages. It can auto-detect the language, which is great. It can do multilingual in the same recording, which is pretty phenomenal, especially for us in South Florida, where multilingual conversations happen all the time. There isn't a graphical user interface. And so if you were to Google Whisper, you'll see sites that like do Whisper online and they're paid. And that's because they've made an interface for you to use it. And they're still just relying on the same open source software. But you can run it locally, kind of from those same like tools that I told you. You would install it, and then you would run the command to do it within your command line, which is another reason why knowing how to use that command line is important to run some of these scripts as well. Tesseract is kind of the equivalent, but it's for text recognition. It's free, open source, widely used. A lot of the engines that are commercial are still using this as the engine, and you have access to this engine for free. You just need to install it locally on your computer. It's kind of same thing. Different languages that it supports. This isn't great for handwriting. It's not really great for old typewritten stuff before typewriters kind of got standardized. And again, it's got no GUI, but you can run it. And to literally just to install it, you just like go to your command line and hit brew install tesseract, and it will download and ask you which kind of languages you want to have included. I wouldn't say it's super easy to use because you need to know the exact commands to do, but there's tutorials on all of this. This was a really good tutorial, I think, from NYU library, that can walk you through the process. But this will allow you to do text recognition without having to buy any software. It is a little like intense on your computer. If I'm running a lot of this, I try not to touch the rest of my computer. I just go on my laptop, because it does take a lot of computing power to run. But it's great to have a free option. Transcribus or Transcribus, I don't know how you say it, is a tool that I mentioned before that was made really kind of for historians. This is meant for historical documents. This is meant for people in cultural heritage world. And you can tell because look how nice and easy it is to use. It also allows you to easily train it. So I could put up a file, look and see how it translated the handwriting, and I can fix it and it will learn from what I've fixed. All the other ones that I'm talking about, you can edit it, but that information is not going back into the system. This does. It's kind of a conversation with it and allows you to easily train it. It's cloud-based though. It's not something you can run locally. So it might not be great for restricted materials that aren't going to be publicly available, but it's really kind of phenomenal. Like we had trouble reading these and it did pretty great. And it can then give you an output of a text file or a PDF that's, got the hidden layer text within it, which is great for findability in your digital repositories, wherever you might be putting this, or it's, within your own that you can find and replace or find, text within it. And it's especially helpful because I don't know about you, but a lot of our interns and students can't read cursive. So, an extent, a lot of this stuff is just not as findable because we've just got a crop of people who can't read the cursive, and having this text recognition at least allows people to search and find terms, and be able to read the text output from this handwritten stuff. All right, oh, sorry, 250. Sorry, I'm going really fast. But I really wanted to get all this stuff in here and have time maybe for a Q&A. So Scribe is like my new favorite thing because we've got a new repository and I don't know how to do anything. And it records your screen as you're doing it and creates a little SOP, a little standard operating procedure on how to do things, which is great because then you can also open it up as you're on a website, puts it like on the side to step by step show you. So as you do something, you tell it to record, it does the little circle of where it wants you to click. It gives what it thinks you did that you can then correct. You can have this output as a PDF. It has a free tier. I think at a certain point you have to pay. And if you reach that point, there's also these free or lower cost alternatives, which I've not tested out, but I just wanted to give these as options. I don't know about you, but making training materials can be really time consuming. Having something that's auto capturing that or making it just really easy for me to edit is just such a time saver. All right, now we get to the sticky part. AI generated metadata. Where are we? And things are changing fast. Things are getting really great quickly. Whatever is true right now might be a little different in a few months, as we know. What I think is great is that we still have the option to use a lot of the software for free. If capitalism takes the course it normally does, I would imagine not all this stuff's going to be free forever. So knowing how to use it and knowing what's best and how to evaluate it while we have the ability to play with it. And part of the reason it's free is like we're the product, right? We're helping train it. But we are in an exciting time for this, but it's still in a new and kind of problematic time as well. In a lot of the workshops I've gone to about this, people talk about cataloger GPT, and I think it's a great concept. And now that I'm having to learn a little bit more of Mark, I found it to be really helpful for Mark for giving me Library of Congress subject headings or any sort of a controlled vocabulary. I do find it to be a big fat liar. It'll give me like an amazing subject heading. I'm like, wow, what a great one. What on point? And then I'll say, is that a real one? I go, no, it's not real. And that's because this is not grounded towards actual Library of Congress subject headings. It will give you something that sounds like it. And maybe that's fine. Maybe you don't need a controlled vocabulary and you're looking more for keywords. But if what you're looking for is to make it authoritative record, this isn't quite there. It's also based on an earlier version of GPT. There's newer ones, which I feel like if you had just a really good prompt, you could probably get very similar output. It will still lie and give you fake subject headings because it's not grounded. But it's fun to play with, and has probably some uses in which it's much better than others. For me, making descriptive metadata where I want an authority controlled subject heading, hit or miss. So when should we be doing AI generated metadata? There's a bit of a decision framework here is basically the lower stakes, the metadata that you're doing. Sorry, uh, my mouse is frozen here. I think the more appropriate might be, right? If you're going to use AI generated metadata to describe a collection level archive box that you've just gone through and digitized, and it's going to be how that collection is described from here on out, I don't think that's great. If you're making some, this is just my opinion, an abstract for an oral history and you're going to edit it after, I think that's probably playing with, more reasonable territory. If you're giving it underrepresented people that you know the training data is not coming from, that's another reason to be cautious. If you're not tracking what metadata fields were created by AI versus not, also a little problematic just for us to know. So in this decision framework, if you can't answer yes, maybe you should not be using AI generated metadata as of yet. I also personally have found that textual materials are more reliable than like giving AI a photograph, right? Giving it, using Whisper to get a caption from an oral history, taking that caption file and putting it into a ChatGPT or a large language model and say, can you tell me what this oral history is about? And playing with it and getting a nice abstract is a lot different than giving it a photo with no context and seeing and relying on that as a description. And that's because at heart, large language models are language, right? That's the L in there. So they work best with language. Lower confidence, like I said, would be, things that you give in photographs or images without a lot of context, or with limited documentation. That being said, I decided to test it out because I haven't tested these in a while, and I tried all the big LLMs. I put in this photograph, which is of my husband's grandmother. And I was kind of shocked. I mean, most of them were wrong. Most of them knew I was in Florida because of past conversations. And so they thought the photograph was in Florida when obviously it's not, it's overlooking something. Gemini knew exactly not only where it was, but what rock it was on the mountain. So I thought was pretty amazing. Grok took from the file name, searched my file name, found this record in my repository and knew what collection it was. So it didn't even rely on the photograph as much as the metadata embedded in the photograph, which I thought was interesting. So I won't dwell too much on this, but this was just my little test yesterday. I was like, I need to practice what I preach and see where we are. I'm not going to get into this too much about installing all the software you would need to do things at scale to run APIs and that sort of thing. I think that's beyond the scope of an intro, but some of the same concepts that I'm talking about would still go into effect. And then also the conversation is if you are using AI to generate metadata, the consensus is, and all of this is being standardized probably and will continue to be, is you should disclose it. At the very least in a note in your own metadata records, that it was generated with this tool and reviewed by this person. It's just a different type of source and we should be citing it accordingly. And it's really helpful to know if we learn of certain issues that we can go back and revisit AI generated metadata for any sort of like remediation we'd have to do. And then my final last bit is kind of talking about vendor tools, because there's some amazing ones. There's ones that will give you a digital library platform that you put in photographs and it will export out the title, some suggestion on the date, a description, subject headings. They're amazing, but we need to be thinking about how we analyze those, kind of using those same tools that we talked about before as far as our evaluation. Having a confidence score is kind of the big one. Like, an LLM will just say something's true because it's wired to do that. It's not and all programmed to tell you that it thinks it might be wrong. Um, but you can build into these models something that displays to you how confident it actually is. That's really important to have. Again, this is for like vendor products that get pitched to you, just to be thinking about some of these questions, knowing that you actually have access to this data, knowing what it's trained on, knowing if they have a preservation plan for this platform generally. Don't work. I would not suggest ones that just make it look like it's magic and don't tell you kind of how the sausage is being made behind the scenes. You need some transparency in these, I think, to have any sort of confidence in them. I know I'm pretty much at time, so that's it. With one more thing, actually. I made, this is my honorable mention of an AI tool, Notebook LM. I fed my slides into this and created a podcast. So if this was all just too much information, which I'm sure it was because I talked really fast, once you get this slide, you can click here, and I had an AI generated podcast that talks about all this stuff as well. So you can put it on your phone and put in some earphones and go for a walk and listen to this in a different kind of context. Because as we know, all of this is just a lot. AI is accelerating everything that's coming at us. We need some breaks on this. So if this was too much, listen to it by the AI podcast, and it's very meta. But that's it for me. Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we have a few. If people want to stay on too, for a little bit, we can stay on as long as you have time to answer some questions.
I too. And if anybody ever wants to collaborate or talk, as you can see, I could talk about this for hours. So I'm always happy to talk about it. If anybody wants to test stuff out or.
I mean, I think you gave us a really great introduction. Thank you so much. For everyone who's here and can stay, let's give Rebecca a round of applause. Um, this was a lot of information. There are so many possibilities, right? But also a lot of caveats. So, um,
Not straightforward, but so little
no,
in life is.
yes. Um, I wrote a lot of notes down because we're working on a project right now here. So, uh,
The
really
one
great
thing I
information.
meant to say, like, did anybody ever watch Mythbusters where he says like the difference between science and messing around is documentation, right? And that's really like making sure you're writing this stuff down and keeping track. It's really helpful. It also helps you as you're trying to take that critical eye and look at all this stuff because it's changing all the time. Like I could not believe that some of this was so good by just putting in a photograph. Um, Now that is not at scale, right? That's putting in one photograph at a time. The mechanism to have it all pulled in and go through an entire thing of images needs some setup, which I thought again was kind of beyond the scope of an intro, but it's possible.
Yeah, I like that you added the the part about attributing AI created metadata, adding notes about that. I think that that's been a question that people have had, especially because provenance is so important in cultural heritage work. So noting when we've used non-human generated descriptions, I think is important for confidence of our users.
Right.
Um, so I appreciate that addition. Um,
And it's scary, right? I mean, there is a bit of like, I feel like doing that. I see people to see, I don't want people to think, oh, this wasn't looked at, right? I mean, I get why there might be reluctance to do it. Or you got it and you revise it so much that you think it's something new, but we've got to know there was a reminder to me to be documenting it. And now that we've got our new repository, maybe I'll put it as a hidden field if it's just kind of minor. But yeah, we need to have some best practices for one, acknowledging that we're all using these tools, and two, that we're clear with our users.
I I do have a question in terms of the amount of time do you think it saves when you have to factor in checking accuracy and things like that? So have you found certain tools to be more reliable? And like, how do you feel like the weighing of time savings really lies
The
so far?
rubric that I had showed before, which was like last summer's project, we really thought about that too. Like, what was actually saving time? Like the amount of time it took to when that was like something we like literally like clock watched. Here, how long did it take us to create an abstract from scratch? How much time did it take us to look at and review and edit an AI one? And in that in particular project, we determined it wasn't worth it. There's also the cognitive load of editing versus creating. You kind of get in a zone of creating versus editing where you're like, well, I wouldn't have said it that way, but it's fine. Like you make all these kind of it's more, I don't know, I find it just more emotionally taxing and mentally taxing to edit something sometimes, right? Sometimes it's better than looking at a blank screen. So that's just one of the factors I would put into the evaluation of like, how am I feeling after this? How much time is it taking? I think often about the fact that we're not training interns how to do this. We who have been doing this a long time know how to do this so we can evaluate things correctly. But if you're coming into this profession new and you're only looking at this, you don't have the muscle memory of how you would have done this. So that's something to factor in too. Like maybe AI could do it, but I want to make sure that the next, the younger people in this profession are developing these tools to do this as well. I mean, that's another kind of thing that I think about. But yeah, no, the energy, time, and all that of revising, I think needs to be part of your criteria as you're looking at these as well, for sure.
So we're considering this a lot for remediation projects. So that is kind of, we would have to do that kind of editing anyway. Do you feel like maybe then
Ah,
this might be more tailored or might offer some more time savings if we're looking at it for
yeah, no, maybe.
remediation work?
Exactly. But I would still do like a test. Like for the one we did last summer, what I gave it last summer was intentionally a collection that I knew was an underrepresented community. I did it locally. I didn't put anything up because I was like, if I know bias is there, I want to see it, right? And it was sometimes really wrong and sometimes really right again. And it was, but I wanted to like develop my muscles on learning how to create rubrics and determine what was important to me. And those will vary from, technology to technology in different projects. But that's what I would suggest is like, do a couple, run it through what's worth it, what's not. Are we actually saving time? If we're saving time, where's that time going? Something else you don't like? I mean, there's always gonna be more work. Like and also, what are you losing in knowing what's in your collections, right? We synthesize a lot as we're processing this. That's beyond kind of just the description. We're making connections like, oh, yeah, this is kind of like here and there's that person, right? Like that's helpful when a patron may come to you and want to access something in your collection. All of those things are the things I'm thinking about of just like, what are we giving up in this? Or sometimes it absolutely is straightforward. You're just like, you know what, this is going to clean this, is going to, standardize these, and is going to require minimal effort for me to double check it. Then I think those are great.
Does anyone else have questions? I don't want to be the only one asking questions.
I think I was like a fire hose of like stuff.
I do feel like maybe a part two is warranted, so we can plan for one of those. And everyone keep your eyes peeled for announcements on that. We do have a webinar next week on accessibility, as accessibility for a lot of our websites. The laws are changing. The deadline for a lot of that is next month. So I did note in the chat that handwriting transcription tool is really great for improving accessibility for some of our materials. Although I know not all the hosted content needs to be accessible, but the website itself does. But as universal accessibility benefits everybody, so as much of our websites that we can make accessible possible, and whatever tools we can use to make that easier, I think are worth looking into. So if you're interested in accessibility, join us next week for that. Uh, but yeah, I think that this also has a role to play for things like that. Uh, because making things accessible is also very time consuming. Um, so, and we will have different rules to play by coming soon. So,
I'm definitely attending that. So those are the conversations we are having right now. Um, and an AI can help in some of these, right? The speech to text, the OCR. These are the tools that we'll be relying on. And again, I find them to be less problematic. That being said, it wasn't that long ago when we OCR'd something, we looked through and checked all proper names and we did a lot of rekeying. And even with speech to text, we would go through and make sure proper names were right. I have found AI to be pretty helpful with that. You can give it a caption file and then say, what are the proper names in here that I should research? And be able to like find that. It's been pretty good. But yeah, no, this to me is where the tools they really shine.
I don't see any questions in the chat. But Rebecca's email is here if anyone has any follow-up questions for her. You are also welcome to email me. You'll have my email from your registration, but also I will be sending a copy of the slides and a link to the recording as well. So you'll have my email if you would like to send me any questions that I can pass on to Rebecca. If you have any suggestions for additional training sessions or anything like that, also feel free to email me, but I will be including a survey link in that email as well, so you can include that in there if you'd like. And I think it's so cool that you also made a podcast. So,
It cracks me up. It sounds like real people. I don't know if anybody's played around with it, but you're just like, if you ever wanted to really geek out on a subject and listen to a podcast on your really niche thing, just give it like source material and then you have a podcast on like your thing. It's great. Thank you
so
again, though, Kayla, for putting this
yeah,
together.
no,
These are
thank
great.
you. Your knowledge is very vast and very much appreciated. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us. Everyone, welcome to give Rebecca another round of applause. I'm going to stop the recording and